Maya Chun is working double shifts as an event server at Seoul's most exclusive nightclub, saving every dollar for her nursing school tuition, until one wrong turn through unmarked doors lands her face-to-face with Korea's most dangerous crime family during a private execution meeting. At 23, Maya balanced silver trays loaded with champagne flutes and the relentless pressure of tuition deadlines with equal determination. She was practical, focused, and understood exactly how much every shift at Club Platinum was worth toward her future. Her natural hair was pulled back in a sleek protective style that stayed perfect through 12-hour shifts, framing warm brown skin that glowed even under the club's harsh LED lights. Her dark eyes, though tired from working doubles 6 days a week, never lost their steady resolve. She had exactly $8,147 saved toward the $15,000 deposit for Seoul National University's accelerated nursing program. The deadline was 3 weeks away. Club Platinum occupied the top 3 floors of one of Seoul's most exclusive buildings, where membership cost more than Maya's annual salary, and the guest list read like a directory of Korea's most powerful elite. Maya had worked events here for 6 months, long enough to recognize faces from business magazines and political news, but smart enough to keep her observations to herself. The pay was exceptional, the tips generous, and the management made it clear that discretion was valued above everything else. The private event tonight was different from the usual corporate celebrations and political fundraisers Maya typically served. The guest list was smaller, the atmosphere heavier, and the security presence more obvious. Men in expensive black suits positioned themselves at strategic points throughout the venue, their sharp eyes scanning constantly. The guests themselves moved with a particular kind of controlled confidence that Maya had learned to recognize as the bearing of people accustomed to power and its consequences. Maya hurried through the main event space, balancing a tray of crystal glasses filled with aged whiskey that cost more per bottle than her monthly rent. Her feet ached in the required black heels, her uniform pressed and perfect despite the humid Seoul summer heat that made the club's air conditioning work overtime. She needed to get these drinks to the VIP section on the 3rd floor, then clock out and catch the last subway home to her tiny studio apartment in Hongdae. The main elevator was occupied by a group of guests engaged in intense conversation in rapid Korean that Maya's limited language skills couldn't follow. Rather than wait and risk being late with the drinks, she decided to take the service elevator down to the 2nd floor and use the back stairs to reach the VIP level. She'd done it before during busy events when the main routes were congested with guests and security. The service corridor on the 2nd floor was dimly lit, lined with unmarked doors that led to storage rooms, staff offices, and private meeting spaces that Club Platinum rented to members who needed absolute privacy for their business discussions. Maya walked quickly, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor, balancing the tray carefully as she navigated the narrow hallway toward the stairwell she knew led to the VIP level. She paused at what she thought was the stairwell door, a set of heavy double doors with no markings or windows. Maya had used this route twice before during particularly busy nights, though she realized now that she'd been following other staff members those times. Tonight, working alone and focused on not dropping the expensive whiskey, she pushed through the doors without hesitation. The room beyond was nothing like the stairwell she expected. Maya stepped into a soundproofed space dominated by dark leather furniture and walls lined with what looked like expensive artwork. The lighting was low, focused, creating pools of shadow between areas of warm illumination. The atmosphere was heavy with tension that made the air feel thick enough to choke on. This was clearly one of Club Platinum's most exclusive private meeting rooms, the kind reserved for members who paid premium prices for absolute privacy. What made Maya's blood freeze was not the luxurious setting, but the scene unfolding in the center of the room. A man sat tied to a chair, his expensive suit rumpled and stained, his face bearing fresh bruises that suggested the meeting had already been progressing for some time. Blood trickled from his split lip as he struggled against restraints that showed no signs of yielding to his efforts. Standing before the bound man was someone Maya recognized immediately from her months of serving Korea's elite, though she'd never seen him in a context like this. Park Jimin commanded attention in any room through sheer presence alone, but here in this private space, His authority was absolute and terrifying. Park Jimin was 34, Korean, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Maya's semester tuition. His dark hair was styled perfectly despite whatever activities had preceded her arrival, and his sharp features remained composed as he regarded the bound man with cold calculation. There was something almost sculptural about his face, all clean lines and controlled intensity, but his dark eyes held a depth that suggested violence was merely one tool in a vast arsenal of capabilities. He held a crystal glass similar to the ones on Maya's tray, swirling amber liquid with the casual elegance of someone completely comfortable in his environment. When he spoke to the bound man, his voice carried the kind of quiet authority that made people listen without being raised. Two other men flanked Park Jimin, both wearing the same expensive black suits that marked them as security, but their positioning and alertness suggested they were far more than typical bodyguards. These were professionals accustomed to handling situations that required discretion and efficiency. Maya stood frozen in the doorway, her tray of whiskey glasses trembling in her hands as her mind struggled to process what she was witnessing. The bound man was pleading in Korean, his words desperate and rapid, while Park Jimin listened with the patience of someone who held all the power in the situation. The soft click of the door closing behind Maya seemed to echo like a gunshot in the tense silence. Every head in the room turned toward her. Park Jimin's dark eyes fixed on Maya with laser focus, taking in her server uniform, her obvious shock, and the tray of drinks that marked her as staff rather than an invited participant in whatever business was being conducted. His expression didn't change, but Maya felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing pressing against her chest. One of the bodyguards moved toward her with fluid efficiency, his hand reaching inside his jacket in a motion that Maya's survival instincts recognized as dangerous even without understanding exactly what weapon he might be reaching for. "I'm sorry," Maya managed to whisper, her voice barely audible above the bound man's continued pleading. "I was looking for the stairwell. I'll leave immediately." Park Jimin raised one hand in a subtle gesture that stopped his bodyguard's advance. His eyes never left Maya's face as he studied her with the intensity of someone evaluating a potential threat or opportunity. The room fell completely silent except for the bound man's labored breathing. "Close the door," Park Jimin said quietly, his English perfect and unaccented. His voice carried absolute authority despite its conversational tone. Maya realized with growing terror that he was speaking to her, not his men, and that compliance was not optional. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs as she understood that her simple navigation mistake had just altered the trajectory of her life in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. She had walked into a world where witnesses were liabilities and discretion was literally a matter of life and death. The crystal glasses on her tray caught the light as her hands shook, creating tiny rainbows that seemed grotesquely beautiful against the backdrop of violence and fear that now defined her reality. Maya's breath caught in her throat as the reality of Park Jimin's command settled over her. "Close the door." The words echoed in her mind as her survival instincts warred with her paralysis. She wanted to run, to pretend this moment had never happened, to return to her simple world of serving drinks and studying nursing textbooks. But the weight of Park Jimin's attention made it clear that her previous life had ended the moment she walked through those unmarked doors. Her hands trembled as she reached behind her for the door handle, the crystal glasses on her tray creating a soft chiming sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence. The heavy door closed with a definitive click that sounded like a prison cell sealing shut. "I'm so sorry," Maya whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was supposed to go to the VIP level. I got lost. I'll forget everything I saw here. I promise." Park Jimin's dark eyes remained fixed on her face with an intensity that made her feel completely exposed. He moved with fluid grace to set his crystal glass on a side table, the motion controlled and precise. Everything about him radiated the kind of dangerous competence that made Maya's instincts scream warnings about predators and prey. Behind Park Jimin, the bound man had fallen silent, his wide eyes darting between Maya and his captor as if calculating whether her presence might provide some opportunity for escape or rescue. The two bodyguards positioned themselves with professional efficiency, blocking any potential exit routes while maintaining clear sight lines to both Maya and their primary prisoner. "What is your name?" Park Jimin asked, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had commanded her to close the door. His English was flawless, educated, with the kind of precision that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Maya Chun," she replied automatically, then immediately regretted providing her real name. Her practical mind raced through possibilities. Lie about her identity, claim she didn't understand English, pretend to be more confused than terrified. But something in Park Jimin's steady gaze suggested that deception would be both futile and dangerous. "How long have you worked at Club Platinum, Maya Chun?" Park Jimin continued, taking a step closer that brought him within arm's reach. His expensive cologne carried hints of bergamot and something darker, more complex, that seemed to match his dangerous elegance. 6 months, Maya answered honestly. Her heart pounded so hard she was certain everyone in the room could hear it. "I work events. Serving. I'm saving money for nursing school." Park Jimin's expression shifted almost imperceptibly at her mention of nursing school, a flicker of something that might have been recognition or interest crossing his sharp features. He gestured to one of his men with a subtle movement of his fingers. "Check her phone," Park Jimin ordered. The bodyguard stepped forward with professional efficiency, his large hand extended expectantly. Maya's mind went blank with terror. She fumbled for her phone with shaking hands, nearly dropping the drink tray in the process. The bodyguard steadied her elbow with surprising gentleness before taking the device and examining it with the thoroughness of someone trained in digital security. "No recordings, no photos," the man reported after several tense minutes. "Social media shows student life, work schedules. Nothing suspicious." Park Jimin nodded as if this information confirmed something he had already suspected. His attention returned to Maya with what might have been approval, though his expression remained carefully controlled. "You could have tried to record evidence," Park Jimin observed, his tone almost conversational. "You could have taken photos before announcing your presence. You could have lied about your identity or your reasons for being here. But you did none of those things." "I was too scared to think," Maya admitted, her voice growing steadier despite her terror. "I just wanted to leave and pretend this never happened." Park Jimin studied her with the intensity of someone evaluating a complex problem that required careful consideration. His gaze took in her worn uniform, the practical shoes she wore for long shifts on her feet, the student identification card visible through the clear window of her phone case. Maya realized he was seeing not just a potential security threat, but a person with dreams and struggles that he somehow recognized. "You are tired," Park Jimin observed. "Exhausted from working double shifts to afford an education that might lift you from service work to something more meaningful. Your uniform is well maintained, but showing wear. Your hands show the calluses of someone who works physically demanding jobs. You carry yourself with determination despite obvious fatigue." Maya stared at him, unnerved by how much he had deduced from brief observation. She wanted to ask how he could read so much from such small details, but her voice seemed to have abandoned her entirely. Park Jimin made another subtle gesture, and his men moved with practiced coordination. One approached the bound man, while the other positioned himself near a side door that Maya hadn't noticed before. Within moments, the prisoner was being escorted from the room, his fate uncertain but clearly removed from whatever conversation was about to unfold. When the room emptied except for Maya and Park Jimin, the silence became even more oppressive. He moved to a leather chair that commanded the space, settling into it with the natural authority of someone accustomed to controlling his environment. "You have witnessed something that requires my complete trust in your discretion," Park Jimin said, his voice carrying weight that made every word feel significant. "In my world, witnesses present problems that must be solved definitively." Maya's blood turned cold at the implication behind his words. Her legs felt weak, and she gripped the drink tray more tightly to keep her hands from shaking visibly. "However," Park Jimin continued, reaching into his jacket with the same fluid precision that marked all his movements, "you have demonstrated qualities that suggest a different solution might be possible." He withdrew a business card unlike any Maya had ever seen, pure black with characters in silver that she couldn't read, but the quality of the material and the weight of it in his fingers suggested expense and exclusivity beyond anything in her experience. You have two choices, Maya-chan, Park Jimin said, holding the card between his fingers like a playing card that would determine her fate. You can work for me directly, ensuring absolute discretion about anything you witness, and receive compensation that will make your financial struggles disappear permanently. Or you can disappear completely, because knowledge of my business cannot exist outside my control. Maya understood that disappear carried implications far beyond leaving Seoul or changing her identity. Her mouth went dry as the full weight of her situation settled over her like a suffocating blanket. Park Jimin extended the black card toward her, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made refusal seem impossible. The choice is yours, Maya-chan. But choose carefully, because this moment will define the rest of your life. Maya stared at the black business card for the entire 40-minute subway ride back to Hongdae, her mind spinning between terror and impossible hope. The weight of the card seemed disproportionate to its size, as if it carried the gravity of a decision that would reshape everything she thought she knew about her future. Her studio apartment felt smaller than ever when she finally climbed the 4 flights of stairs to her door. The contrast between Club Platinum's luxury and her cramped living space had never been more stark. Chipped linoleum floors, a single window that looked out onto a narrow alley, furniture that she'd assembled herself from discount stores. The refrigerator hummed with the persistent vibration of something that needed repair but would have to wait until she could afford a service call. Maya set the black card on her tiny kitchen table and stared at it, as if it might provide answers to questions she wasn't even sure how to ask. The silver characters were beautiful but incomprehensible, elegant script that suggested sophistication and danger in equal measure. She opened her laptop, a refurbished model that took several minutes to connect to her building's unreliable Wi-Fi, and searched for Park Jimin. What she found was a carefully curated digital presence that revealed nothing about the man she'd encountered tonight. Park Jimin appeared in business journals as the founder of Park Industries, a conglomerate with interests in real estate development, luxury hospitality, and international shipping. Photos showed him at charity galas, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and business conferences, always impeccably dressed, always surrounded by people who looked at him with the deference reserved for serious money and influence. There were no criminal associations visible anywhere in his public profile. No scandals, no investigations, no hints that Park Industries was anything other than a legitimate empire built by someone who understood how to navigate Seoul's complex business landscape. Maya realized that whatever she had witnessed tonight existed in a world completely separate from his public identity. Her phone buzzed with a text message that made her stomach clench with fresh anxiety. Tuition payment reminder, 21 days remaining. Late fees will be assessed after deadline. Maya checked her banking app, though she already knew the numbers by heart. $8,147 saved over 6 months of double shifts, skipped meals, and walking instead of taking buses whenever possible. She needed $6,853 more in 3 weeks, an impossible amount even if she worked every available shift at Club Platinum. Her phone buzzed again. Rent notice, payment overdue. Please remit within 5 business days to avoid late fees. Maya buried her face in her hands, feeling the weight of choices that seemed designed to crush her spirit. Every path forward required money she didn't have, and every day of delay made her situation more desperate. She had been so focused on nursing school that she'd let other bills slide, gambling that her deposit acceptance would lead to student loans that could cover her immediate expenses. The black card seemed to pulse with possibility on her kitchen table. Maya picked up her phone and dialed the number embossed in silver on the card's surface. Her heart hammered as the phone rang once, twice, then connected to a voice she recognized with a mixture of relief and terror. Maya-chan, Park Jimin said, as if he had been expecting her call. His voice carried the same quiet authority that had commanded her attention in that soundproof room, but without the immediate threat that had made her blood freeze. Mr. Park, Maya replied, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. I would like to discuss your proposal. A car will arrive at your building in 30 minutes, Park Jimin said simply. The driver will bring you to a place where we can speak privately. The line went dead before Maya could respond, leaving her staring at her phone and wondering if she had just made the most important decision of her life or signed her own death warrant. Maya spent the 30 minutes changing into her best clothes, a black dress she'd bought for job interviews and worn to exactly 3 occasions in the past year. She applied makeup with hands that trembled slightly, trying to present herself as professional rather than desperate, though she suspected Park Jimin saw through such pretenses with ease. The car that arrived was a black sedan with windows tinted dark enough to hide its occupants, driven by a man in an expensive suit who greeted her with polite formality and opened the passenger door without speaking. Maya slid into leather seats that cost more than her monthly rent, surrounded by the kind of luxury that felt like stepping into a different world entirely. The drive through Seoul's evening traffic gave Maya time to process the magnitude of what she was considering. She was about to enter into business negotiations with a man whose other business involved interrogating bound prisoners in soundproof rooms. Whatever legitimate empire Park Jimin had built existed alongside activities that required absolute secrecy and the kind of loyalty that came from fear as much as compensation. The sedan pulled into the underground garage of a building that rose toward the stars like a monument to ambition and success. Maya followed her silent escort through security checkpoints staffed by men whose alertness suggested military or police backgrounds, past elevators that required key card access, to a private lift that rose smoothly to floors she couldn't count. Park Jimin's penthouse office occupied what seemed like an entire floor of the building, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of Seoul stretching to the horizon. The space was a study in minimalist luxury, all clean lines and expensive materials, furnished with pieces that looked like they belonged in design magazines. Everything spoke of wealth accumulated not just for comfort, but for the statement that power made about the person who wielded it. Park Jimin stood with his back to the elevator as Maya entered, his silhouette sharp against the city lights. He wore a different suit than earlier, charcoal gray replaced by midnight blue that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When he turned to face her, his expression was more readable than it had been in the soundproof room, showing what might have been approval at her promptness. "Please, sit," Park Jimin said, gesturing to a leather chair positioned across from a desk that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of dark wood. Maya settled into the chair, hyper-aware of how the expensive leather molded to accommodate her body, a small demonstration of the kind of comfort that serious money could provide. "You called more quickly than I anticipated," Park Jimin observed, taking his seat behind the desk with the natural authority of someone accustomed to controlling conversations from that position. "This suggests your financial situation is more pressing than your pride." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks at his blunt assessment, but forced herself to maintain eye contact. "You're not wrong," she admitted. "I need money faster than any legitimate job can provide it." Park Jimin opened a leather portfolio and withdrew several documents that he arranged on the desk between them with precise alignment. "Your nursing background makes you valuable in ways you might not have considered," he said. "I require medical services that cannot involve hospitals or traditional healthcare providers." "What kind of medical services?" Maya asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. "Treatment of injuries that occur in the course of business operations," Park Jimin replied with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing routine corporate policy. "Bullet wounds, knife cuts, broken bones that cannot be explained to emergency room personnel. Nothing beyond your training, but everything requiring absolute discretion." Maya stared at him, processing the implications of what he was describing. "You want me to be your personal trauma surgeon," she said. "I want you to be my private medical consultant," Park Jimin corrected. "Annual compensation of $150,000. Your nursing school tuition paid in full immediately. A secure apartment in one of my buildings. Monthly support payments to your family in America. Complete medical insurance and legal protection under my organization's umbrella." Maya's breath caught as she processed numbers that would solve every financial problem she faced and provide security she had never imagined possible. "But you would own me," she said quietly. "I would protect you," Park Jimin replied, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made the distinction feel less clear than she wanted it to be. "You would belong to my organization, yes, but you would also be valued beyond anything you have experienced in your current life." Maya thought about her overdue rent, her impossible tuition deadline, the exhaustion that had become her constant companion as she worked toward dreams that seemed to recede further with every passing month. She thought about her family in America, struggling with their own financial pressures that she couldn't help with her current income. "What happens if I want to leave?" Maya asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Park Jimin was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if evaluating how much truth she could handle. "People who work for me directly do not leave," he said finally. "The information you would gain, the connections you would see, the operations you would support all require lifetime commitment to discretion. So I would trade my freedom for financial security," Maya said, voicing the transaction in terms that made its weight clear. "You would trade uncertainty and struggle for safety and purpose," Park Jimin corrected. "You would use your healing skills to help people who cannot seek traditional medical care. You would be protected by resources that make your current vulnerabilities disappear permanently." Maya stared at the documents on his desk, contracts that would reshape her entire existence with her signature. Her practical mind raced through calculations that had been dominating her thoughts for months. Tuition deadlines, rent payments, student loan interest rates, the grinding poverty that made every decision a choice between bad and worse options. She looked up at Park Jimin, this dangerous man who somehow saw value in her nursing skills and offered solutions to problems that had seemed insurmountable just hours ago. Her current path led to debt, exhaustion, and dreams deferred indefinitely. His offer led to security, completed education, and family support, but tied to a world where witnesses disappeared and loyalty was enforced through fear. Maya reached for the pen Park Jimin placed beside the contracts, understanding that this moment would define everything that followed. "I accept," she said, her voice clear and steady despite the magnitude of what she was choosing. Her signature flowed across pages that sealed her fate with elegant permanence. Park Jimin smiled for the first time since she had met him, an expression that transformed his sharp features and made her glimpse the man behind the dangerous authority. "Welcome to your new life, Maya-chan," he said, and Maya realized she was no longer afraid. 6 weeks after signing Park Jimin's contracts, Maya understood that her previous life had been a collection of survival strategies held together by determination and caffeine. Her new existence felt like stepping into a parallel universe where problems she had accepted as permanent fixtures simply disappeared overnight. The apartment Park Jimin provided occupied the 23rd floor of a building in Gangnam, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased Seoul's skyline and furnishings that spoke of wealth accumulated with careful taste. Maya's previous studio could have fit entirely into the apartment's marble-appointed bathroom. The kitchen contained appliances she had only seen in magazines, and the bedroom featured a bed large enough for 3 people, dressed in sheets that felt like silk against her skin. Maya enrolled in Seoul National University's accelerated nursing program with tuition paid in full, no student loans required, no anxiety about whether her savings would stretch far enough to cover textbooks and lab fees. Her professors treated her with the deference reserved for students whose financial backing suggested serious family connections. She studied advanced trauma care, emergency medicine, and surgical assistance with an intensity driven by understanding that her education would serve purposes far beyond traditional hospital work. The medical work Park Jimin required proved both more complex and less horrifying than Maya had anticipated. She treated knife wounds that resulted from business disagreements, set bones broken during enforcement activities, and provided post-surgical care for procedures that had been performed by discreet doctors who asked no questions about their patients' occupations. The injuries were real, the pain was genuine, and Maya discovered that her nursing instincts overcame any moral qualms about the circumstances that had created her patients' conditions. Park Jimin checked on her progress with the regularity of someone personally invested in her development. He appeared at her apartment without warning, bringing medical equipment that she had mentioned needing, discussing her coursework with a depth of knowledge that suggested research into healthcare practices far beyond what casual interest would require. Maya realized that Park Jimin understood trauma medicine with the thoroughness of someone whose survival had depended on such knowledge. "Your professors speak highly of your clinical skills," Park Jimin told her during one of his unexpected visits, settling into the leather chair that had become his preferred seat in her living room. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed despite whatever business had occupied his day, and his sharp features showed the controlled fatigue of someone who carried significant responsibilities. "I had good teachers before I started formal nursing school," Maya replied, cleaning her hands after treating a bodyguard's bullet graze. "My grandmother was a medic during the Vietnam War. She taught me that healing requires steady hands and calm thinking regardless of circumstances." Park Jimin's dark eyes showed genuine interest at this revelation. "Combat medicine and civilian trauma care require different mindsets," he observed. "Your grandmother understood that saving lives sometimes means ignoring the politics of how injuries occurred." Maya nodded, recognizing the parallel he was drawing between her family history and her current situation. She had inherited practical skills and moral flexibility that made her valuable in ways she had never considered before Park Jimin identified her potential. 3 weeks into her new arrangement, Maya witnessed a different side of Park Jimin's controlled persona. She was organizing medical supplies in her apartment when the sound of breaking glass echoed from the kitchen. Maya found Park Jimin standing over fragments of what had been an expensive whiskey tumbler, his right hand bleeding from several cuts across his knuckles. "Business complications," Park Jimin said tersely when Maya approached with medical supplies. "Someone I trusted chose loyalty to money over loyalty to family." Maya guided Park Jimin to the kitchen sink without asking for additional explanation. His hand was steady despite his anger as she examined the cuts under bright light, assessing depth and debris with professional thoroughness. "Hold still," Maya instructed, her voice carrying the authority she had learned from treating uncooperative patients. "This needs proper cleaning before I can see what requires stitches." Park Jimin's expression shifted as Maya worked, his controlled intensity replaced by something that might have been surprise at her calm competence. She cleaned each cut with antiseptic, removed glass fragments with precision, and bandaged his knuckles with the same steady efficiency she would show in any emergency room. "You are not afraid of blood," Park Jimin observed as Maya secured the bandages with medical tape. "Blood is just another bodily fluid that responds to proper treatment," Maya replied practically. "Fear does not help patients heal faster." Park Jimin studied her face as she packed away medical supplies, his expression showing an evaluation that went beyond professional assessment. "You see me as a patient requiring care rather than a dangerous man who could end your life with minimal effort. When you are injured, you are a patient," Maya said simply. "That is how medical training works. Your capacity for violence does not change the fact that cuts need cleaning and proper bandaging." Park Jimin was quiet for several minutes, flexing his bandaged hand experimentally. Maya realized she had surprised him with her matter-of-fact approach to his humanity beneath his dangerous authority. 2 weeks later, Park Jimin shared the story that explained his protective intensity and his investment in Maya's medical capabilities. They were reviewing her emergency surgery training materials when he mentioned that his sister had died from complications that could have been prevented with proper medical intervention. "Min Young was 3 years younger than me," Park Jimin said, his voice carrying emotion that he rarely allowed to surface. "Sweet, intelligent, everything good in a world that too often rewards cruelty over kindness. She fell in love with a man who seemed charming until he began using his fists to win arguments." Maya set down her textbook, recognizing that Park Jimin was sharing something that explained the driving force behind his empire building and his current focus on protection. "Min Young was afraid to go to hospitals because her boyfriend had convinced her that doctors would ask questions she could not answer safely," Park Jimin continued. "When internal bleeding from his beatings finally overwhelmed her system, she died in a back alley clinic run by someone with veterinary training rather than medical education." Maya felt her chest tighten with understanding. She built her empire to ensure that money would never be the barrier between his people and proper medical care, but also to ensure that fear would never force someone he cared about to accept substandard treatment because traditional healthcare was not an option. "I could not save Min Young because I was too focused on building power to notice she needed protection," Park Jimin said, his dark eyes holding Maya's with intensity that made his words feel like a vow. "But I can ensure that no one under my protection ever faces such choices again." Maya understood then that her role in Park Jimin's organization was not just about treating injuries sustained in criminal activities. She represented his promise to himself that people he valued would have access to skilled medical care regardless of circumstances that might prevent them from seeking traditional healthcare. Despite her growing understanding of Park Jimin's protective motivations, Maya still flinched when his controlled demeanor cracked during business conversations. She was studying in her bedroom when she heard his voice rise during a phone call in her living room. The controlled authority replaced by cold fury that made every word sound like a threat. Maya found herself pressed against her bedroom door, heart racing as Park Jimin's voice carried the kind of menace that reminded her exactly who she was working for and what he was capable of when crossed. When silence returned to the apartment, Park Jimin appeared in her bedroom doorway, his expression back to its usual controlled intensity, but his eyes showing the afterglow of whatever anger had just been unleashed through the phone. "You are afraid," Park Jimin observed, noting Maya's position against the door and her rapid breathing. "You sounded like someone who kills people without hesitation," Maya admitted, her voice shaking despite her efforts to remain calm. Park Jimin stepped closer, his presence overwhelming in the confined space. "I am someone who kills people when necessary," he said quietly. "Does that knowledge change how you see me as a patient requiring medical care?" Maya considered his question seriously, weighing her growing understanding of his protective motivations against the reality of his methods. "It makes me aware that you are capable of violence," she said finally, "but it does not change the fact that you bleed like anyone else when injured." Park Jimin smiled at her response, an expression that showed approval and something that might have been affection for her practical approach to moral complexity. 3 days later, Maya's theoretical understanding of the dangers associated with Park Jimin's world became terrifyingly practical. She was walking to Seoul National University for an advanced surgical technique seminar when a black van pulled up beside her on the sidewalk. 3 men emerged before Maya could process what was happening, moving with professional efficiency that suggested military or police training. One grabbed her textbooks while another seized her arm with a grip that made resistance impossible. "Maya-chan," the man holding her arm said in accented English. "You have information we require about Park Jimin's medical needs and operational security." "I don't know anything about operations," Maya protested, struggling against their grip as they began moving her toward the van's open door. "I just treat injuries." "Your access to Park Jimin makes you valuable for information gathering," the man replied, his tone suggesting that her protests were irrelevant to their plans. Maya's nursing training included self-defense awareness, and her practical mind recognized that entering the van would likely mean disappearing permanently. She twisted suddenly, breaking free from the grip on her arm, and sprinted toward the university's main entrance where security cameras and witnesses would make abduction significantly more difficult. The men pursued her but abandoned the attempt when campus security approached to investigate the disturbance. Maya reached the university building with her heart pounding and her hands shaking from adrenaline and terror. She called Park Jimin from the safety of the nursing school's faculty office, her voice trembling as she described the attempted kidnapping and the questions her attackers had asked about his medical needs and operational security. "Stay exactly where you are," Park Jimin said, his voice carrying lethal calm that made Maya understand that her attackers had just made a serious mistake. "I am coming to get you, and this situation will be resolved permanently." Maya sat in the faculty office, surrounded by nursing professors who assumed she had experienced a random street crime, and understood that her integration into Park Jimin's world had just moved from theoretical to devastatingly real. Park Jimin arrived at Seoul National University within 12 minutes of Maya's call, a response time that suggested he had dropped everything and mobilized resources with military precision. Maya watched from the faculty office window as 3 black vehicles pulled into the parking area with synchronized efficiency, their tinted windows and professional coordination marking them as something far more serious than typical civilian transportation. When Park Jimin emerged from the lead vehicle, his expensive suit was perfectly pressed despite whatever urgent business he had abandoned to respond to her crisis. His sharp features showed controlled fury that made the air around him seem to vibrate with barely contained violence. Maya realized she was witnessing Park Jimin in full operational mode, the dangerous authority that built and maintained his empire focused entirely on her protection. Maya descended to meet him in the university's main lobby, her legs unsteady from residual adrenaline and the growing understanding that her attempted kidnapping represented something far more serious than random street crime. When Park Jimin saw her, his expression shifted from lethal calculation to something approaching relief, though his dark eyes continued scanning the area for potential threats. "Are you injured?" Park Jimin asked, his hands moving to her shoulders with surprising gentleness despite the controlled fury radiating from every line of his body. "No," Maya replied, though her voice shook with delayed shock. "They grabbed me, but I got away before they could get me into the van." Park Jimin's jaw tightened as he processed her words, and Maya saw his free hand flex an emotion that suggested he was restraining himself from immediately pursuing violent retribution against her attackers. "You are not staying here," Park Jimin said, his tone making it clear that discussion was not an option. "We are going somewhere secure while my people handle this situation." The safe house Park Jimin chose was a penthouse apartment in a building that looked like exclusive residential housing, but felt more like a fortress when Maya experienced its security protocols firsthand. Electronic locks that required multiple authentication methods, elevators that moved only with proper authorization, and security personnel positioned with military precision throughout the building. Maya sat in the apartment's main room, surrounded by luxury that no longer impressed her as much as it once had. While Park Jimin made phone calls in rapid Korean that she could not understand, but whose tone suggested deadly serious business being conducted with brutal efficiency. This was not random, Park Jimin said when he finished his calls and joined Maya on the leather sectional that dominated the living space. "The men who attempted to take you knew your name, your connection to me, and your value as a source of information about my operations." Maya felt ice forming in her stomach as the implications of his words settled over her. Someone had been watching her, studying her routines, gathering intelligence about her relationship with Park Jimin specifically to use her against him. "Being associated with me makes you a target," Park Jimin continued, his dark eyes holding hers with intensity that made every word feel weighted with significance. "There is no neutral ground in my world. You are either protected by my organization or you are vulnerable to my enemies." Maya understood then that her attempted kidnapping represented the inevitable consequence of her decision to accept Park Jimin's proposition. She had traded financial security for entry into a world where violence was simply another business tool and where anyone connected to power became a potential target for that power's enemies. "But being under my protection also makes you untouchable," Park Jimin said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had first commanded her attention in that soundproof room weeks ago. "Anyone who threatens you threatens me directly, and I respond to such threats with permanent solutions." Maya realized that Park Jimin was offering her more than just physical security. He was claiming her as part of his inner circle, extending the same protection to her that he provided to family members and core organizational assets. The weight of such protection came with obligations that went beyond her medical services. "What are you going to do about the men who tried to take me?" Maya asked, though part of her already knew the answer from the controlled fury that had not entirely left Park Jimin's expression. "They will be found," Park Jimin replied simply. "They will provide information about who ordered your abduction. Then they will disappear permanently, along with anyone else who thought targeting you was an acceptable strategy." Park Jimin left the safe house 3 hours later, his departure preceded by additional security personnel arriving to ensure Maya's protection while he handled what he described as urgent business requiring his personal attention. Maya understood that urgent business meant tracking down her attempted kidnappers and responding with the kind of violence that would send clear messages to anyone else considering similar strategies. Maya spent 6 hours alone in the secure apartment, studying nursing materials and trying to focus on normal activities while understanding that somewhere in Seoul, Park Jimin was destroying people who had threatened her life. The luxury surrounding her felt surreal against the backdrop of knowing that violence was being committed specifically to ensure her safety. When Park Jimin returned just after midnight, Maya noticed the changes immediately. His expensive suit was replaced by dark clothing more suitable for activities requiring physical engagement. And though he had clearly attempted to clean himself thoroughly, Maya's medical training made her attentive to details others might miss. His hands showed the kind of minor abrasions consistent with physical altercations, and despite his careful grooming, Maya spotted traces of blood under his fingernails that had survived his cleaning attempts. There was something different in his posture as well, a looseness that suggested recent physical activity and the satisfied exhaustion of someone who had completed necessary but demanding work. "Is it finished?" Maya asked as Park Jimin settled into the chair across from where she had been reading. "The immediate threat is eliminated," Park Jimin replied. "The people who ordered your abduction have been convinced that future attempts would be unwise for their health and business interests." Maya approached Park Jimin with medical supplies she had retrieved from her bag, noting how his sharp features showed fatigue that went beyond simple physical tiredness. She knelt beside his chair and reached for his hands, examining the abrasions on his knuckles with professional thoroughness. "You have been fighting," Maya observed, cleaning the cuts with antiseptic while Park Jimin remained perfectly still under her ministrations. "I have been protecting what belongs to me," Park Jimin corrected, his voice carrying possessive weight that made Maya understand she was no longer just his employee, but something far more significant to his personal security and emotional investment. Maya realized that instead of being horrified by the evidence of violence on Park Jimin's hands, she felt profound gratitude. He had used these hands to destroy people who wanted to hurt her, to send messages that would prevent future threats against her safety. The moral boundaries she had maintained her entire life shifted as she understood that his capacity for violence was what made her security possible. As Maya bandaged Park Jimin's knuckles, she understood that her feelings for him had evolved far beyond professional appreciation or even physical attraction. He had proven that her safety mattered to him enough to personally engage in whatever brutal activities had been required to eliminate her enemies permanently. "You are no longer just my medical consultant," Park Jimin said as Maya secured the bandages with medical tape, his dark eyes holding hers with intensity that made the distinction feel crucial. "You are mine to protect, my responsibility, my treasure. Anyone who threatens you threatens me directly." Maya felt her breath catch at the possessive claim in his words, but instead of fear or resistance, she experienced something that felt like relief at being claimed by someone powerful enough to make such protection absolute. "And you are mine to heal," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. "When you come back from dark business with blood under your fingernails, I am what reminds you that you are more than just the violence you commit to protect people you care about." Park Jimin's expression showed surprise at her reciprocal claim, followed by something that might have been satisfaction that she understood the balance between his capacity for destruction and his need for someone who could anchor him to his humanity. Maya leaned forward and pressed her lips to Park Jimin's forehead, a gesture that felt both protective and possessive, claiming him as surely as he had claimed her. She realized that she belonged to him not just through contractual obligation, but through emotional investment in his well-being that went far beyond professional duty. Park Jimin pulled Maya closer, settling her against his chest while his arms encircled her with the same protective intensity he had shown when eliminating threats against her safety. Maya listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and understood that she had found not just financial security, but emotional sanctuary with someone whose dangerous capabilities were matched by his absolute devotion to protecting what he valued. "You are safe now," Park Jimin murmured against her hair, his voice carrying promises that extended far beyond the immediate crisis they had just survived. "Nothing will touch you again." Maya believed him completely, understanding that Park Jimin's protection would follow her for the rest of her life, whether she wanted it or not, and discovering that she wanted it more than she had ever imagined possible. 2 weeks after the kidnapping attempt, Maya's life settled into a rhythm that felt both luxurious and secure in ways she had never imagined possible. The attempted abduction had been the last time anyone questioned Park Jimin's ability to protect what belonged to him, and Maya understood that her safety was now guaranteed by a reputation for swift and permanent retaliation that extended throughout Seoul's criminal underworld. Maya threw herself into her nursing studies with renewed focus, knowing that her education represented not just personal achievement, but preparation for a role that would expand far beyond treating Park Jimin's associates. Her professors at Seoul National University praised her clinical skills and theoretical understanding, noting that she approached trauma medicine with the kind of calm competence typically seen only in nurses with years of emergency room experience. Park Jimin attended Maya's graduation ceremony, arriving in a black suit that probably cost more than most attendees' annual salaries, accompanied by security that was subtle but unmistakable to anyone trained to notice such things. Maya spotted him immediately in the crowd of families and friends, his sharp features showing unmistakable pride as she crossed the stage to receive her degree in nursing with highest academic honors. Other students and their families noticed the expensively dressed Korean man who photographed Maya's graduation with the intensity of someone documenting a moment of profound personal significance. Maya realized that Park Jimin's presence at such a public event represented more than just support for her educational achievement. It was a statement that she occupied a position in his life that warranted his public acknowledgement despite the security risks such visibility might create. After the ceremony, Park Jimin took Maya to dinner at Seoul's most exclusive restaurant, the kind of establishment where reservations required weeks of advanced planning and tables were assigned based on the patron's social and financial standing within the city's elite hierarchy. Maya wore a dress that Park Jimin had provided, midnight blue silk that flowed like water and probably cost more than her previous monthly rent. "You have completed the first phase of your transformation," Park Jimin said as they shared champagne that sparkled like liquid diamonds in crystal glasses. From struggling server to skilled medical professional, achieved in record time through focus and intelligence that impress everyone who works with you. Maya felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, understanding that Park Jimin's approval came from someone whose standards were exceptionally high and whose praise was not given carelessly. "But I want to offer you something beyond professional achievement," Park Jimin continued, his dark eyes holding hers with intensity that made every word feel weighted with significance. "I want you to become my wife, not just my medical consultant." Maya's breath caught as Park Jimin reached into his jacket and withdrew a velvet box that he placed on the table between them with the same careful precision he applied to everything of importance in his life. "I want you as my official partner in legitimate business enterprises," Park Jimin said, opening the box to reveal a ring that caught the restaurant's soft lighting and scattered it into rainbow fragments across the white tablecloth. "Mother to future children who will inherit an empire built on protection and prosperity. Respected matriarch of my organization who commands the same loyalty and protection that I do." The ring was a platinum band supporting a diamond that seemed to contain entire galaxies of fire and light within its perfectly cut facets. Maya understood that its value extended far beyond its monetary cost. It represented Park Jimin's public claim on her and his intention to make their relationship legally and socially permanent. Maya felt tears prick her eyes as she processed the magnitude of what Park Jimin was offering. Marriage to him would mean more than just personal commitment. It would make her the official partner of one of Seoul's most powerful men, with all the privileges and responsibilities such a position entailed. "Yes," Maya said without hesitation, her voice clear and strong despite the emotion that made her hands tremble as Park Jimin slipped the ring onto her finger. "I accept all of it. The marriage, the partnership, the future we will build together." Park Jimin's smile transformed his sharp features with genuine warmth and satisfaction, and Maya realized that her acceptance had provided him with something he valued more than power or wealth: the security of knowing she chose him completely and permanently. Within days of their engagement, Park Jimin began implementing legal arrangements that would secure Maya's position and protection regardless of any circumstances that might threaten his own safety or freedom. Maya found herself listed as primary beneficiary on legitimate business holdings worth tens of millions of dollars, with legal documentation that would ensure her financial security even in worst-case scenarios. He established trust funds for Maya's family in America, monthly payments that would eliminate their financial struggles permanently while providing them with health insurance and educational opportunities they had never been able to afford. Maya called her parents to share news of her engagement and her nursing degree completion, listening to their voices fill with relief and joy as she described her secure future. "Your young man sounds very serious about taking care of you," Maya's mother said during one of their long-distance conversations. her voice showing the kind of maternal satisfaction that came from knowing her daughter had found someone capable of providing security and stability. "He is serious about everything he does," Maya replied, understanding that her mother could not comprehend the full scope of Park Jimin's capabilities or the methods he employed to ensure such comprehensive protection. Wedding planning proceeded with the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized everything in Park Jimin's world. The ceremony would be small, limited to trusted inner circle associates and Maya's immediate family, who would fly to Seoul for the occasion. Security arrangements were extensive but invisible, ensuring that the celebration would appear elegant and intimate while actually being protected by layers of armed personnel and electronic surveillance. Maya's parents and younger sister arrived in Seoul 3 days before the wedding, their obvious nervousness about meeting Park Jimin quickly replaced by appreciation for his respectful treatment of them and his obvious devotion to Maya's well-being. Maya watched Park Jimin charm her family with genuine interest in their lives and subtle demonstrations of the resources he could provide for their future security. "He is very intense," Maya's sister whispered during a private moment while Park Jimin was showing their parents around his legitimate business offices. "But he looks at you like you are the most precious thing in the world." Maya smiled at her sister's observation, understanding that Park Jimin's protective intensity was exactly what made her feel completely safe for the first time in her adult life. The police investigation into the attempted kidnapping concluded officially during the week before Maya's wedding, with detectives reporting that they had found no usable evidence, no witnesses, and no leads that might identify the perpetrators or their motivations. Maya understood that the investigation's failure resulted from Park Jimin's thorough elimination of everyone connected to the threat against her, but appreciated that the official conclusion would prevent future law enforcement interest in her security situation. Maya and Park Jimin married on a Saturday evening in the penthouse where their relationship had been formalized through contracts and negotiations. The ceremony was conducted by a judge whose discretion Park Jimin trusted completely, witnessed by associates who understood that Maya's safety was now their professional responsibility as well as their personal honor. Maya wore white silk that flowed like cream around her body, carrying flowers that Park Jimin had chosen because their fragrance reminded him of peace and healing rather than power and conquest. When she promised to love and honor Park Jimin for the rest of her life, Maya meant every word with the understanding that their marriage represented not just romantic commitment, but strategic alliance between two people whose survival and prosperity were now permanently intertwined. 6 months after their wedding, Maya established a medical clinic in partnership with Seoul National University that provided healthcare services to people who might otherwise lack access to proper medical treatment. The clinic was funded through Park Jimin's legitimate businesses but operated independently, allowing Maya to use her nursing skills to serve the broader community while maintaining her availability for organizational medical needs. Maya discovered profound satisfaction in treating patients whose injuries resulted from workplace accidents, domestic violence, or simply the financial inability to afford traditional health care. She realized that her position as Park Jimin's wife provided her with resources to heal people whose suffering might otherwise go unaddressed by a medical system focused on profitable patients. Park Jimin supported Maya's clinic work with the same intensity he applied to protecting his other investments, ensuring that she had access to the most advanced medical equipment and the highest quality pharmaceutical supplies. Maya understood that his support reflected not just husbandly affection, but recognition that her healing capabilities enhanced his organization's reputation within Seoul's complex social and political landscape. The charity gala where Maya and Park Jimin announced the establishment of a medical scholarship fund for students from financially disadvantaged backgrounds represented the culmination of Maya's transformation from struggling server to respected partner of one of Seoul's most influential men. Maya stood beside her husband in the ballroom of Seoul's most prestigious hotel, wearing jewelry that caught light like captured stars and surrounded by people who treated her with the deference due to someone whose protection came from serious power. Maya watched Park Jimin work the room with practiced ease, noting how other powerful men sought his attention and approval while their wives competed for her friendship and social acknowledgement. She understood that her position provided her with influence that extended far beyond the medical services she provided to Park Jimin's organization. The scholarship fund would ensure that other young people facing financial barriers to healthcare education would receive the same opportunities that Park Jimin had provided for Maya's advancement. Maya felt deep satisfaction knowing that their wealth would create pathways for others to develop skills that could save lives and provide healing in a world that often seemed dominated by violence and exploitation. As the evening progressed, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from carrying drink trays through Club Platinum's service corridors to standing beside Seoul's most dangerous businessman as his respected wife and partner. Her past life felt like something that had happened to a different person, someone whose dreams had been constrained by financial limitations and whose security had depended on exhausting physical labor. Park Jimin found Maya during a quiet moment between speeches and formal presentations, his hands settling on the small of her back with possessive tenderness that had become as natural as breathing. "Are you happy?" he asked quietly, his dark eyes showing the kind of vulnerability he reserved only for private moments when his protective walls could safely come down. "I am safe," Maya replied, understanding that safety represented the foundation upon which all other forms of happiness could be built. "I am valued, protected, and able to use my skills to heal people who need help. I have a husband who would destroy entire organizations to ensure my well-being." Park Jimin smiled at her response, and Maya realized that her acknowledgement of his protective capabilities pleased him more than any romantic declaration could have achieved. "You walked into the wrong room 8 months ago," Park Jimin said, his voice carrying amusement at the accidental nature of their first meeting. "Now you stand beside me as my wife, my partner, and the person who gives meaning to everything I have built." Maya leaned against Park Jimin's solid warmth, surrounded by luxury and influence that guaranteed her security for the rest of her life, and understood that walking through those unmarked doors had been the most fortunate mistake she could possibly have made. She was no longer running from financial struggle or uncertain about her future. She was standing beside the most powerful man in Seoul, protected by resources that made threats against her unthinkable, valued for skills that brought healing to a world that needed her compassion and competence. Maya Chun had found her place in Park Jimin's dangerous world and discovered that safety could be more precious than freedom when it came from someone whose devotion was as absolute as his capacity for eliminating anyone who might threaten her peace.